Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. So, here's what Notre Dame quarterbacks coach Gino Guidugli says surprised him the most about Riley Leonard when he got to see him play healthy for the first time.
He's got better arm strength than I anticipated. Like when you get him in live play, that ball really comes out of his hand. And then like when you see him run and extend plays, whether that is in quarterback run or he's just scrambling in the pass, like he doesn't look fast, but like he's out there outrunning safeties and corners to the edge, and it's like, man, he's faster than you think. It's deceiving.
So, Jess, what does it say that Leonard's arm strength and his speed are the things that have surprised Gino Guidugli the most so far?
I think what it says is that this offense is something that we should be ultimately even more excited about, because Riley Leonard's arm strength means that he's going to have the ability to push that ball deep down the field. You know, basically, when you think about it, he's Ian Book with, more size, more arm strength, and honestly what sounds like a little bit more speed, basically getting around that corner, right? And so when you're in an offense like Mike Denbrock, you need the ability. After a while, you can't just keep checking the ball down or, throwing the 5-yard slant routes, flood routes over the middle, 10-yard routes. So you have to be able to some point set up those deep shots with more of the intermediate kind of short stuff, right? And so I think it's a testament to how explosive this offense can be, really, because now you have the defense on its toes of, okay, are they going short? Are they going to go long? And his ability to drive that ball downfield, I think, is just going to open up more avenues for this offense. And likewise, with his legs is too. It's gonna be fun to watch him extend plays. It's to me kind of like Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes doesn't have blazing speed, but he's got enough speed to extend plays. Pick up those 3 and 4 yards on a third down where maybe the pocket collapses. Again, he's not gonna be like Lamar Jackson, right? Like he's not gonna be out there juking and pulling away from guys, but he's going to have enough speed to extend plays and help the offense, continue drives, essentially. I think that's essential.
And I'm sure that some of that arm strength surprise comes from the fact that when Riley Leonard was at Duke, he wasn't really asked to throw the ball deep that much. I don't know if it's maybe just like they didn't have that kind of receiver. Most of what you see when you go back and you're watching some of these old games of Riley Leonard is a lot more shorter to intermediate type stuff, kind of, maybe what you were saying there, more like Ian Book. So I'm sure that's caught him off guard. And the ball doesn't always look the prettiest, those deep balls when you see Riley Leonard throw them deep, but they are getting there. And the fact that you've got such an increased speed element in this wide receiving core and those things that you were touching on there, drive the ball deep, all these different things. That's going to look a lot different. And then the thing with the speed is like, I think what has struck most of us in the media seeing Riley Leonard up close is just how big he is, like how tall he is, and how filled out for a quarterback he is as well. He doesn't have like those shorter, choppier sort of Ian Book kind of, strides to him. He has the really long, like if you watched any of the Olympics, the difference at, like when, especially like in a 200 or a 400, like the difference in these taller guys with the really long strides that they have and their ability to continue to gain ground on these shorter striders. I think that's got to be part of what pops as well. And like Gino was saying, his ability to get the corner is so much easier when you're a long strider like Riley Leonard and you have the athleticism to go with it. So just kind of piggybacking on what you were saying, I think that it's going to be such a fun added element that we're going to see offensively this season. Bringing Mike Denbrock in obviously is part of that, but having a quarterback with this skill set like Riley Leonard is just going to look a lot different than what we've got used to seeing over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately just going to be a quarterback that's a playmaker, right? And again, I'm not trying to say he's Patrick Mahomes, but that's the kind of style of play that you want him to have. He's not going to have the same arm strength, obviously, the same ability, but that's kind of going to be his style of play, I believe, is just the ability to really extend plays and have the arm strength to get those balls downfield when needed. It's not going to be an every throw type situation, but again, you have to be able to set up those all different kind of routes. You can't just be, sticking to, because then defenses can sit in zones that are, covering that, 5 to 20 yard, kind of pocket, I would say, in the defense. So you have to be able to get the defense on their toes.
So speaking of Riley Leonard, here's what the new Irish quarterback had to say about one of his new teammates, freshman quarterback CJ Carr, when he was asked if he sees any similarities in Carr compared to Leonard when he was a freshman.
Not really any similarities. He's like way above where I was as a freshman. Like honestly, like night and day.
What makes him
we don't
so
have any similarities.
impressive?
I think his mental preparation and his will to learn, and he's just so eager to develop himself as a quarterback, and he just loves football. Like obviously he has a family that's been around football his whole life, but he just loves football. And a lot of freshmen at the time are here just coasting, trying to figure it out. Oh, at a new school, like let me go to this, go here. But he really just wants to watch film and hang out with us. So, well, there are no similarities.
Picking your brain a lot.
Yeah, he does. And I try to give him advice every once in a while. But, I mean, the kid really doesn't need too much advice, to be honest with you. Like, I don't know, he's pretty dialed.
Pretty dialed. Some pretty high praise from Riley Leonard for CJ Carr. What's that tell you about Carr, Jess?
I think the thing that came to mind most was he's an old soul as a freshman. He's a guy that's super mature. He talked about his ability to learn, his eagerness to learn, and he's just a football guy. He wants nothing more than to be good at football. He's not distracted by what's the extracurriculars that are going on outside of practice or just stuff that ultimately can kind of get you in trouble, right? And so if you want to be a good football player, you have to constantly be a student of game and just commit to it ultimately. So he just sounds like an old soul that's, a senior that's in a freshman's body essentially at the end of the day. And so I think that's really a good sign for, the overall quarterback development. And it's just going to push everyone else. It's going to push Minchie in the room. It's going to push Angeli in the room. It's going to push whoever, comes in and as, the quarterback next is he's going to set the standard for what it means to be a quarterback. And I think that's something really exciting to see.
I mean, I think he's going to set a new standard for what it means to be the quarterback at Notre Dame. That's TBD, but I think that is in the not too distant future. We're going to be having a lot of different conversations a year from now. But to hear, it is worth noting that Riley Leonard had a much different recruiting profile than what CJ Carr had, like coming out of high school. We talked a couple of weeks ago about how Riley Leonard basically – he was planning on being a basketball player coming out of high school. And then because of, some different factors and his connection to David Cutcliffe at Duke, his high school coach's connection to David Cutcliffe at Duke, that led to a path there, but didn't take Riley Leonard long because of that athleticism to escalate up the depth chart. I think he said that by week 5, he went from scout team to starting within a week at Duke, so that obviously says something about Leonard. And so for him, again, a guy who's a year ago was getting NFL looks and is going to have a lot of NFL eyes on him this year in his final year at Notre Dame, for him to say that CJ Carr is just that more advanced, I think just says a ton about CJ Carr, because again, like we all know the lineage that Carr has with his grandpa Lloyd in Michigan and all those different things. But I think that it's just like we played a cut from Gino Guidugli about Minchie and Carr yesterday, and it just feels like everything is pointing to CJ Carr is coming. It's not if, it's when CJ Carr is coming. How quickly that rise actually happens. And it's honestly, it's pretty exciting because there's been a hype around other quarterbacks coming into Notre Dame before, but not one with this kind of polish probably since Jimmy Clausen. And because you add the whole Carr family name factor into this, I think it takes it to another level even. So a lot of fun things coming with CJ Carr in the not too distant future. So, Vince and I talked a lot yesterday about the approach Al Golden and Max Bulla will have with the linebackers this season. Here is a quick refresher from Max Bullough.
5 guys that are rotating like starters. We go 1s and 2s at practice, but we don't have 1s and 2s in our room. I got 5 guys that are playing equal. We're rotating them, and different guys start the period every day, and that's been the best thing for our room. That's been the best thing for us.
So just to kind of remind anyone who was here yesterday, or refresher for people who weren't here yesterday, the 5 guys are Jack Kaiser, Drake Bowen, Kingston Viliamo-Asa, Jalen Sneed, and Jaden Ausberry. And again, like when you listen to Max Bullough, they're not just rotating 5 guys into these 3 spots. There's not a traditional first string and there's not a traditional second string. All these guys are going to play, and they're all going to play a lot. And some of, like, if this guy sees the field, depends on, okay, who else is on the field right now, that kind of thing. So, I mean, you basically started playing linebacker when you were 7 or 8 years old and played it for 14, 15 years or whatever. So what do you think of this plan that they're going to use this season?
So obviously when you hear this, it's not traditional, right? But I think that Notre Dame has an abundance of talent at the linebacker position. And at the end of the day, you have to find a way to incorporate all that talent on the field, or one, you're doing a disservice to the player, and you're doing a disservice to the team, because, look, no one as a player, I would rather, play, maybe 30-40% of the snaps compared to 0 snaps. Obviously, there's going to be guys who, amongst those linebackers are going to play more than others, but you're going to be able to utilize what they're good at, and you're going to be able to get them on the field. And so for a group that doesn't have a big gap between the players, right? Like, that's ultimately what it is. The talent gap between these guys is so small that you have to be able to find a way to get them all on the field. And really what this reminds me of, like, when I actually saw this online the other day, I think it was on Twitter. It reminded me, do you remember Georgia, like 2-3 years ago, when they just had that stud linebacker core where I think literally all of them got drafted? I mean, they did, pretty sure Pollock did, a sit down before college game day with them and just talked about, basically the same thing. There was a group of 5 to 6 of them, and they all played. And he asked them, like, are you guys comfortable with that? Are you guys comfortable with, sharing reps essentially? And they said, we are going to do what's going to make our defense the most fast, the most athletic. And that year, Georgia had one of the top defenses in the country, and it obviously didn't hurt the player because they all ended up getting drafted, right? So at the end of the day, I think this is what's best for their defense, and I think it's what's going to be best for them as players as well, because you're going to get – there's just not going to be as many upset or grumpy players because they're not playing, because they all have the talent to play, right? And so if you're just trying to, stick to this traditional of 1s and 2s, well, I guarantee the 2 is going to, feel some type of way and be like, I'm just going to hit the transfer portal. I know I can play somewhere. So I think it's a good way of getting everyone involved.
Well, it's all, there's a lot to everything that you just said there. One, and Max Bullough said it in another comment that he had when we talked to him the other day. I mean, he played linebacker, and what he said was, look, I was on the field almost all the time. So this is a lot different than that. Everyone would want to be on the field as much as possible. Do you think, based on kind of what you're saying, do you think that this is more like especially with the less experienced guys, like Jack Kaiser is one thing, these other guys are another thing, really, like, especially with those other 4, do you think this is about, you've got 4 guys who are really even and, rip-roaring and ready to go, or is it more about, okay, maybe this guy is ready to go, like Kingston Viliamo-Asa, for example. He's really stood out as a pass rusher and a blitzer. We haven't got to see him necessarily as much like as a run-stopping type middle linebacker because we haven't got to see live reps and those kind of things at practice. So do you think this is more about trying to mask deficiencies or truly just play to strengths, I guess, or just a mix of both? Because it kind of seems like that's what it is.
I think, ultimately, I think it's a mix of both. I think there's not a lot of talent separating that group. And I think they're having a hard time kind of figuring out, how do you pick one or the over the other, instead of just being like, okay, why not look at it as we have this group and let's kind of play them all. And then, like you said, I think naturally you're going to get into, maybe Drake Bowen is more on your rundowns and KVA is in on more, some of those passing downs, or you bring him in a 5-man blitz or something like that. I think there is obviously going to be things that one is better at than the other.
Right.
And it's finding that kind of cocktail of, okay, here's when we want to play them. But we know that even if they have enough talent to play, they could be a standalone starter. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. But again, it's like filling in the pieces almost. It's like, to me, it's like when a baseball team goes with a bullpen day. It's like they find a way to kind of work a guy for 2 innings, 3 innings, 2 innings, 1 inning. And it's like, okay, we trust you enough to be effective for that period of time, but we know you're not going to be the most effective if we put you out there for 7, 8 innings. So it's kind of how I view this.
Are you in on Jack Kaiser needs to be out there as much as possible because he's the most
still need
experienced?
To have someone to set the defense. I think that's a lot to ask for a true freshman. And again, maybe they're really good at it, but the stress of not only making your reads and playing at a high level, that's already hard as is. And so it's someone with like Jack Kaiser who has the more experience of actually playing. I think he should be kind of handling the more of, okay, let's, relay the calls. Let's get set as a defense. I do think that you kind of have to have one person out there that is the consistent, foundation of it. And everyone else is kind of, rotating around whatever that snap share looks like. But I do believe that you want someone like a veteran out there to be able to handle, those sort of things.
And I do believe it's fair for kind of the contrarians to sort of look at this and doubt the plan, I guess, because there is so much youth, and this is the biggest question that the defense has is the linebacker core and exactly what this is going to look like. But I find myself pretty intrigued and excited with this plan, like being able to, again, like some other stuff that Bulla talked about was, okay, when some of these guys, they'll go to Viper potentially, like in the nickel package when the Rover comes off the field and a defensive back comes on, and now you put a guy like Jalen Sneed or Viliamu Asa up there at Viper because they're even quicker twitch, and they can do one of two things. They can get downhill and get to the quarterback, or they can also defend space pretty well. So I think it's pretty exciting. And I'm also not on like they're doing this to try to appease people, like just to try to keep everybody happy. I don't think that's what this is about. I think that it is truly, they have a bunch of young, talented guys, and they're just trying to find a way to get that, one, that skill set on the field, but two, not put too much on any of these young guys.
And you want to overload them.
Yeah, and just play to their strengths as much as possible.
And I think naturally, too, there's going to be someone who is, ends up playing better. So it's almost like an open audition as well.
Like,
because
as the season goes on, the roles can change for sure.
Right. Yeah. And I think it becomes very situational, which is nice because now you have more pieces to kind of put the puzzle together of how, maybe this game plan calls for this, or maybe, there's going to be teams that are more run heavy. There's going to be more teams that are pass heavy. There's going to be more teams that you want to try to create pressure for. And so I think that's definitely a factor. And yeah, like I said, these guys are all playing so well and at a high level, and it's so hard to, we don't want to determine ones and twos. Well, go ahead and go out there in a game. And that can be, how you're going to determine ultimately who's going to get more, I think Marcus Freeman would say this, who you can trust more out there given the situation.
Are you worried at all when you are rotating so many guys so steadily that they can get caught, oh man, trying to, you should have substituted or wanted to substitute? I think that comes down
to coaching. I think you have to get them to buy into the concept and their role of what they're contributing, right? Like it's like the hockey rotations where guys are coming in, specifically to kind of do their role. And I think that's what you have to make sure to get through their head is, we want you to do your role and we want you to be really good at it because that's what's ultimately going to help this team reach its next level, help this defense reach its next level. And so as long as there's just open communication and no one is surprised or caught off guard, I think where you get into trouble is basically what Brian Kelly did when all of a sudden it was just, hey, you guys are splitting time at quarterback. And it's like, no one knew that you got, you know what I mean? It's like no one knew that they were splitting time. Not even those guys knew that was even, the possibility. So if you can communicate that up front and just be completely transparent and everyone knows their role. And so it's like, okay, like for example, Drake Bowen, you've been telling him all week, hey, you're going to start the game. KVA is going to come in at some point. And then all of a sudden now KVA is the starter come game day. Like, how is Drake Bowen supposed to feel when, he's been preparing and been told all week that one thing? You just can't let those sort of things happen.
Right. Exactly. Fill in the blank. Notre Dame nickelback. Jordan Clark says Fighting Irish wide receiver Jaden Greathouse reminds him of Raiders receiver Davante Adams. The comparison is blank.
The comparison is freaking electric, because if Jaden Greathouse can perform like Davante Adams, like this offense should just go, like he should be a 1,000-yard receiver. He should have 10 touchdowns. Like this offense should be a top offense in the country if Greathouse is playing like Davante Adams. I don't think he has nearly the height. And I don't think he's, maybe as filled in as Davante Adams is. Maybe you can fact check me on their height here real quick, but to get that sort of comparison is just something that makes me as a fan even more excited and like I said, electric for the season, because we know if this offense has a wide receiver like that, and if they perform at a certain level, we know what that means in terms of how they're going to perform on the national level. And, that's ultimately what's been missing out of this offense the last few seasons is a wide receiver like Davante Adams. So it's like you could say those things, but don't get our hopes up, because that's exactly what this offense needs.
I know. Like there's a lot of hype to, being passed around with some of these guys offensively.
They're all feeling themselves
when these comparisons come and everything. They're both 6'1" officially. So you got that. Now, is Greathouse as filled out as Davante Adams? Probably not. For a college guy, he's pretty filled out, though. If anything, I do like the comparison. If anything, like probably the biggest differences to me, because I think speed and skill set were, some of the things that Jordan Clark was talking about, and the size comparison. But like Davante Adams is more savvy. Like he's the guy. He's just a veteran wide receiver who knows those soft spots, knows where to sit, knows what he needs to do to get himself to the ball. That's something that Jaden Greathouse kind of, has to show that he can do more of. And you don't expect a freshman, like he was last year, to maybe have that kind of savvy right off the bat, like unless you're a Michael Floyd or something like that, more a unicorn than anything. But I think that what Greathouse has shown, at least especially in comparison to how the Raiders have used Davante Adams the last couple of years, is Greathouse is more positionally flexible. Like you definitely see Adams more as a pure outside guy, whereas Greathouse is going to line up in the slot. He's going to line up boundary. He's going to line up field. So positionally, he can do a lot of different things and create some different mismatches and stuff like that. But I think it's a pretty fun comparison. It's one I hadn't really thought about until hearing Jordan Clark talk about it. So, Jesse, Bryan Driskell trying to find himself a new NFL team. My question to you, if you were going to ditch the Cowboys and find a new NFL team, who would you choose?
So I narrowed this down to 3 teams: the Dolphins, the Chargers, and the Lions. And I think all of them make very compelling cases. I think, first of all, you can't go for a bandwagon team, a team that's already successful.
Right.
Because at that point, what are you going to be called? A bandwagon fan, right? Obviously, you're not going to pick a team that sucks. And so you're not going to go with, like the New Orleans Saints or the Carolina Panthers or the Arizona Cardinals or, those sort of teams. Like there's nothing really exciting about them. But the things I like about the Dolphins, one, I love McDaniels. I think I would love to play for him. I think he's a great coach. I think he's very personable, very relatable. I like seeing him out there on the field, the way he talks and communicates with his players. He's a tremendous head coach. And I think what's also admirable about him is how young he is, his offensive mind. I think that's something Bryan could appreciate, as, the way he has designed that offense to be around Tua and Tyreek Hill. Those are exciting things. The Chargers, And it's like, if you can remove Jim Harbaugh and everything that's happened at Michigan, like, he's going to be a good coach for the Chargers. And so you combine that with Justin Herbert. They have the pieces there. And I think they are just on the brink of, getting into something good there with in terms of the Chargers.
I mean, that does make a lot of sense, because I agree with what you're saying. You can't pick a team that's especially been successful probably within even the last 20 years if you're going to jump on a new team, right? And the Chargers have only been to one Super Bowl all time. That was, a year before you were born. So we're going on 30 years now at this point. The Harbaugh connection would be the only drawback. But other than that,
he's still a good coach.
Brian's old school football guy
yes.
and all that kind of stuff. And, and they've got a quarterback. He's going to like that approach, and they're going to be successful really soon. So
they're going to be successful in the trenches.
Hadn't thought about the Chargers, but you're exactly right on that. And I like the Miami. The Dolphins basically the Dolphins and the Lions were both teams that I had thought of as well.
Yeah, and it's just like, how can you not root for the Lions? I hope Derek's not in the chat, because I didn't want to say that out loud. But Dan Campbell's awesome. Seeing how he is turning that franchise essentially around, and getting them to really perform. Like, it's something you have to be excited about. And I wish I didn't have some close friends that were Lions fans, because I think I'd be rooting for them more. But I secretly am rooting for them. I like the way that they're doing things. They've really rebuilt it. They're doing it, piece by piece at a time. I think Dan Campbell is, again, another great leader of men. And it's like they're just, I think, missing a couple more pieces on defense in the secondary. And I think they have, some of those pieces at wide receiver, at quarterback. They've rebuilt the offensive line. It's just – and I think what the best part about it is Dan Campbell is going to squeeze everything out of them. There's nothing in that team that's going to be left short. He is going to get maximum potential out of there and probably exceed your expectations at times. I
mean, I said it 2 years ago, the year before they made the playoffs. And that was the year they did Hard Knocks. They beat the Packers, knocked the Packers out of the playoffs in the last game of the regular season. It's like it's a very hard team to root against until they play your team, basically, and then they're easy to root against. But like I wasn't sure how this whole Dan Campbell thing was going to go, especially watching, some of that Hard Knocks. It's like, is this just an old school kind of nuthead kind of just football guy? There is some of that with Dan Campbell, and he likes to quote Metallica and everything else. But you're absolutely right. I don't think that Dan Campbell can be criticized for not getting the most out of his team. He absolutely is, at least last year anyway, and I think the year before that, even when they were building up to it, he's definitely got the most out of his team the last couple of years. There's going to be a lot more expectations now. The division now is getting better as well, but it's an easy team to root for. Like, if you're a free agent fan, the Detroit Lions are a very easy team to root for, I think. I mean, honestly, the only thing that might keep Brian from picking the Lions is someone who we both know, Brian and I, who is a big Detroit Lions fan. That might be the only thing that would keep him from that. So that would be my guess. But 3 good ones. I would actually have to put the Chargers, I think, at the top of the list, because it's coming with Jim Harbaugh.
That's right. And I think the good point you made about just, what is there not to like there? They have a really good quarterback. They're going to be really solid in the trenches. Joe Alt just got drafted there. Mm-hmm. I mean, Notre Dame's secondary coach is now out there. Like, there's a lot of pieces that would connect you.
Out there. There's actually a lot of Notre Dame connections out there.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Fill in the blank. Your least favorite NFL TV personality is blank.
Can I give you 2?
Sure. Why not?
You know who one is. Kyle Brandt is up there. And I think Dan Orlovsky is my main answer. I like Kyle Brandt. I thought you were going to come with Cal. I thought you were going to come with Kyle Brandt for sure at the top of the list. No, the thing that makes me frustrated about Kyle Brandt is I like Good Morning Football. I like the NFL Network. I like him, but he just can't ever give up the Cowboys stuff. And so, as a Cowboys fan, I get it. You're probably gonna be like, oh, he's the reality or the truth that you don't want to hear at times. And da 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 da. But it's like, dude, you always talk about, how you are annoyed with the nauseum of the Cowboys, but you are adding to it. You always are talking about the Cowboys. So it's kind of hypocritical at the end of the day.
Yes, because I saw the rant that you tweeted and I was watching that yesterday. It's like every year, like his thing is, well, why am I supposed to believe the Cowboys are going to be any better this year than last year? They always get to the playoffs. They lose the playoffs. It doesn't matter. We have the same discussion every year. Well, the other side of this has just become his whole shtick is the exact spiel that he was spieling on yesterday, which is what I was just talking about. It's like all you're doing now is repeating the same thing every year, and the shtick has grown old.
Well, and it's just like
I still love him. You're right. Like
exactly.
But that particular, it's just like, okay, like you're complaining that we're not supposed to buy into the Cowboys and whatever, and all you're doing is beating the dead horse on the Cowboys. You're just basically hit and play on the same recording every year with what you're saying.
Right. And so that's where it gets frustrating. And it's just like every situation is apparently Cowboy centric, because at the end of the day, what got him going yesterday was the whole CD Lamb situation. How, this is always an issue with the Cowboys. That they say, Jerry's not going to pay the players, and they pay. Well, guess what? Contract holdouts happen with every star player on every good team. And I'm not trying to say this to be, look at me, but it's a good problem to be in when you draft guys that well and you have to find a way to give them money. It's a conundrum. And so at the end of the day, this isn't a Cowboys specific problem. In Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, like every team goes through. Why do you think there's so many franchise tags? Because they can't figure out how to get these contracts done. So this isn't a problem that is just for the Cowboys, but he finds a way to make it about the Cowboys and repeat the cycle of nauseum of talking about them, but getting tired about people talking about the Cowboys.
All right, give me your Dan Orlovsky. Dan
Orlovsky can't put any bias away. He is the most biased analyst I think he might as well just come out and say that he doesn't like this person or likes this person, because that is the root of his analysis. Like, you have to be able to, a person who is supposed to come on TV on a national level and talk about, football in general, you have to get rid of those things. And he constantly gets called out by people that he's doing these shows with, and he still will double down on, I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, Just say you like him more, because that's ultimately what it boils down to.
Right. Because your ridiculous argument, you can't even back it up because it's
the
obvious.
Most recent one was they asked him, who would you take, Mike Tomlin or Kevin Stefanski? He's like, well, Stefanski's a 2-time coach of the year. Mike Tomlin has won a Super Bowl. He goes over 500 every year.
Right.
He gets teams that are average to go to the playoffs. What do you mean you're going to pick Kyle Stefanski? You know what I mean? Like, just say you like him more.
I agree. I think that he's the one who annoys me the most. Let's put it that way. Is Orlovsky. For every good point that he has, it's just like there's just too much of those tinges of the stuff that you're talking about. Like he's coming at it from an angle, It's like and it doesn't take too long to figure out the angle. It doesn't seem like.
Sorry, I went on a little soapbox there.
That's okay. At least Brandt is entertaining. As long as he's not talking about the Cowboys, he's very entertaining. Orlovsky. I actually like Orlovsky talking about college football, like when he's in the booth in college football.
So do I.
I like that Dan Orlovsky, I will have to say. But you're right. Like the NFL Live Dan Orlovsky, the talk show Dan Orlovsky, is a different guy. He knows his X's and O's in his football, but you're right. I completely agree with what you're saying. All right, well, that's going to do it for tonight. Appreciate you, Jesse, for being here. Appreciate everybody else for being here as well. As always, Vince will be in tomorrow. Jess will be in here in a couple of days. We've got another coaches player media availability later this week, so we'll have some of that. We'll hear what some of the coaches have to say later on. But in the meantime, again, hit that like button, subscribe, rate, review, all that great stuff, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.